collection in the family. So what do these papers show us about the transition from French to English in Louisiana? Well, at the time of the Louisiana Purchase, the language of this family was French. Though, of course, for the 40 years before the purchase, the colony had been ruled by Spain. But the Spanish language made few inroads, and I have found no evidence. I've not been through every one of these boxes yet, but I have found no evidence of anything Spanish whatsoever yet. I've tried to start with the earliest material. The few documents in the collection that predate the purchase are in French. Now, there are not a lot of those documents, maybe 20 or 30 that predate the Louisiana Purchase, but they are in French. And French remains the language of most of the business done with someone who's not a French speaker, he just whips the English out and writes wonderful English. I'll just try to read one very, very quickly. To Mr. Powell, okay, sir, I am sorry to hear that the girl Harriet bought by you at the public sale of my father's estate is not well. She was sold at public auction, and as administrator of the estate, I cannot take her back unless I do it under my own responsibility. It must be done by a judgment of the court. You must consult your lawyer about that. I think he handled English very, very well and directly. His son was named James Alphonse. Okay, so I'm going to call him representing the second generation after the Louisiana Purchase. Okay? His son also left writings to show that he knew both French and English. Okay? He was born in 1838 and actually lived